On stage at his count in Witney, and within hours of his party's confirmed majority, the Prime Minister spoke passionately about building one nation. He said he wanted to govern with compassion and to create true social justice. People should be excited by that, whatever their politics. They see the challenges facing our country and they know that political leadership really counts. Today, I'm pleased to say we're joined by many social pioneers, charity leaders, entrepreneurs working to change lives by removing the barriers many people on the margins of our society face. They personify that bigger society the Prime Minister wants to nurture. What makes them so effective is that they know compassion is not enough. They don't just stop at sympathy or symptom relief. They're transformation people. They are the social innovators and volunteers who dream again for those it is so easy to write off. They help neighbourhoods walk taller. And when they succeed, we all benefit. And that's what our work at the Centre for Social Justice is all about too. Partnering with those people on the front line to help politicians do the things that may really turn people's lives around and give them a better hope. We were proud to work with the last government, whether it was more work to tackle poverty, help for troubled families, a better future for children in care, tackling modern slavery, or rehabilitation for prisoners. It's an honour to be with you today, and we're proud to work with the new administration in all it wants to achieve. Prime Minister, with all the challenges and competing priorities anyone in your job must face, we're really pleased you've chosen to focus on these issues so early in your new term. We're eager to hear what you have to say. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for those introductions, and thank you for that welcome. I gather one of the old boys of this school is John Bishop, and he comes back here to speak regularly, and apologies in advance for not being anything like as amusing. In fact, there are no jokes in this speech at all, but it's a privilege to be here. And this is an amazing school. Those figures you've just heard from the head, they are staggering. To go from a fifth of students getting 5 good GCSEs to over 2/3, well above the national average, that is a remarkable transformation. And to do it here in a school where some 60-65% of children are on free school meals really demonstrates, in fact, what this whole speech is about. Don't worry, I'm still going to give the speech, but in just a few words, it is you can do it. A school like this demonstrates we can tackle underachievement. We can tackle disadvantage. We can boost opportunity in our country. It can be done. And schools like this, I find, are the most inspiring places that I visit as Prime Minister. To see what you've done, to take that 20% and turn it into 68% is a remarkable thing. So thank you, and please keep doing it. You're an example to other schools. And other schools not just in low-income parts of our country or deprived parts of our country, but frankly, you're an inspiration to schools in very wealthy areas of our country who don't get results as good as this. And that message should ring out from this great school today. I said on the steps of Downing Street on May the 8th that this would be a one-nation government with working people at its heart. And in its simplest terms, that means that if you want to work hard and get on in life, this government will be on your side. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever your background, whatever stage of life you're at, I believe this government can help you fulfill your aspirations. And let me be clear, when I say whoever you are, I mean it. Whether you voted for me or campaigned against me, whether you're middle income or low paid or not in work at all, whether you live in a leafy suburb or an inner city community, this government wants to extend opportunity. And what in the election campaign I called a good life, we want to extend that for all. That, for me, is the one nation ideal. We've taken great strides forwards with this in the last 5 years. 2 million more people in work, wages rising, more children in good or outstanding schools than ever before. And yet, for all the progress we've made, there are still too many people in our country unable to reach their potential. When less than 1 in 10 children in residential care get 5 good GCSEs, and when more than 1.5 million children are still living in households where no one works, I won't sit back and think the job is done. Far from it. I want everyone in this country to have the opportunity to get on and make a good life for themselves. That is the task of the next 5 years. And today I want to set out how we'll achieve it. It starts quite simply by continuing to work through our long-term economic plan. Line 1, rule 1 of any plan to extend opportunity is to ensure a strong economy. And a secure and strong economy means getting the deficit down. And I know that there are those who somehow think this is not progressive. But let me tell you this, there is nothing progressive about asking the next generation to pay off the debts we couldn't be bothered to deal with. Nothing progressive about robbing from our children. There's nothing progressive about paying more in debt interest than we spend on our nation's schools. Make no mistake, if we're running unsustainable deficits and interest rates went through the roof, it's working people and children in the poorest families who would suffer the most. If taxes are high and businesses are firing rather than hiring, make no mistake, it's working people and their children who would lose out. So yes, we'll finish the job of turning the economy around and doing what I call the bread and butter of good government. Competently running the economy, offering people the security they need to get on in their lives. And that is the first step in improving the life chances of everyone in our country. But today I want to make a bigger and deeper argument about how we realize the one nation ideal and help everyone fulfill their potential. It's an argument that captures social reform as well as economic reform, tying in what we're doing with families and schools with what we're doing with welfare and work. And it's an argument I can act upon more robustly and consistently now that I lead a majority Conservative government. And it goes like this. When it comes to extending opportunity, there is a right track and a wrong track. The right track is to recognise the causes of stalled social mobility and a lack of economic opportunity. Family breakdown, debt, addiction, poor schools, lack of skills, unemployment. People who are capable of work but written off to a lifetime of benefits. Recognise those causes and the solutions follow. Strong families that give children the best start in life. A great education system that helps everyone to get on. A welfare system that encourages work, well-paid work. These are the drivers of opportunity, and we need to extend them. The wrong track, though, is to ignore the causes and simply treat the symptoms of the social and economic problems that we face. And too often, that is what happens. Just take the historic approach to tackling child poverty. Today, because of the way it's measured, we're in the absurd situation where if we increase the state pension, child poverty actually goes up. So what we've seen in the past is that governments respond by thinking much of the answer is to redistribute money through the tax and benefit system, giving families an extra pound here or there, so they move from just below the poverty line to just above it. Now, I don't underestimate for 1 second the difference that extra money can make, but that isn't extending opportunity. It's papering over the cracks, using welfare to present the veneer of fairness. It's a poor excuse for shying away from the fundamental reforms that will deal with the causes of poverty rather than just its symptoms. And frankly, it's a complacency that has let down so many of those who most need our help in our country. So we need to focus on tackling the real causes of child poverty. And that means looking at what we do to support families, looking at what we do to improve education, looking at what we do to give people the help they need to get into work and to support their families. Put simply, how we improve life chances for all. That's a key aim of the One Nation ideal. Now, there's a similar complacency in how we approach the crucial issue of low pay. There's what I would call a merry-go-round. People working on the minimum wage, having that money taxed by the government, and then the government giving them back that money and more in welfare. Again, it's dealing with the symptoms of the problem, topping up low pay, rather than extending the drivers of opportunity, helping to create well-paid jobs in the first place. So this is the change we need. We need to move from a low-wage, high-tax, high-welfare society to a higher-wage, lower-tax, lower-welfare society. Indeed, across the spectrum as a country, we've been too busy picking up the pieces of failure that has gone before. So dealing with antisocial behaviour rather than strengthening families. Managing youth unemployment rather than boldly reforming education. And we all know why. Extending the drivers of opportunity is difficult. It means taking on vested interests like teaching unions or poorly performing local education authorities. And it means talking about things and concepts that some people can feel uncomfortable about. Families, behaviour, the link between effort and reward. Put another way, it's often easier just to sign off another benefit check than it is to get people ready for work or to discuss the importance of stable family life. Now, I'm proud that in the past 5 years, we've begun to turn the tide on that failed approach. We put strengthening families, reforming education, and transforming welfare at the heart of what we've been doing. But in the next 5 years, we have to go so much further. And that begins by recognizing something really fundamental. So many of our country's efforts to extend opportunity have been undermined by what I would call a tolerance of government failure. The failure to look after children in care. The tolerance of sink schools that have failed one generation after another. The acceptance of long-term unemployment amongst hard-to-reach individuals. We have to end the complacency that has sometimes affected our national life that says that some problems are too big and we can just put up with second best. For me, when it comes to extending opportunity, the next 5 years will be about a complete intolerance of this government or state failure. We know it can be done. Let me take just one example. Adoption. Now, in the past, some people have found it easier to fly halfway around the world to adopt rather than wait for the case system at home to finish agonizing about placing, for instance, mixed-race children with white families and vice versa. Now, we're sorting this out, sweeping away the ridiculous rules that stop children being placed in a loving home, more than doubling the capacity of voluntary adoption agencies to recruit adopters, and securing a quicker approvals process so that adopters, potential parents, can now be approved in just 6 months. Now, of course, there's much further to go. We need to continue to tackle the obstacles that stand in the way of children being placed in a loving family. But through the work we've done, we've helped over 5,000 children find a loving home last year. That is a 63% increase on 2011. My point is, it can be done. If you take the action, you deal with the vested interest, you pass the legislation, you recognise that change is needed, it can be done. So when I talk about dealing with state failure, I'm not making an anti-government argument. I'm making an argument about ensuring that government actually works. Government should never give up on its proper responsibilities, but it has got to stop tolerating failure just because it's easier to stick with the status quo. Now, sometimes that will mean taking radical steps to liberate the front line from excessive bureaucracy and paperwork. Sometimes it will mean letting other organisations, like charities, trusts and social enterprises, come in and help do the job, just as we've seen here at Ormiston Bolingbroke Academy, which went from local authority to Academy Trust, and from being the worst performing school in the area to being the best. It's about delivering real change, from building a welfare society to building an opportunity society, from managing state failure to being utterly intolerant of it. These will be some of the crucial tests for this government and for my second term as Prime Minister. So first, families. Now, for me, families are the best welfare system there is. So I've never been shy about supporting them in the work they do. Marriage is now recognised in the tax system. Shared parental leave is now available for parents in the first year of their child's birth. We're helping more families to get on the housing ladder to own their own home, including by building 200,000 starter homes for first-time buyers under the age of 40. And we're also doing more to help families when they hit trouble. So we've increased relationship support funding by 50%, and we'll be investing at least £7.5 million in it every year for as long as I'm Prime Minister. In the next 5 years, we're going to double free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds in families with working parents. And because all the evidence shows if you focus on the early years, you have the best chance of transforming a child's life, we're going to look at how we can create a much more coherent offer to support children and parents in the early years, bringing together all those services targeted at getting children school ready by age 4. And believe me, with a 4-year-old with a birthday in August, I know just how challenging that can be as people come up to that September deadline. But I'm clear, if we really want to extend opportunity in our country, we do need to intervene more directly to help the most vulnerable families in our country. Our Troubled Families programme, under Louise Casey, has changed lives. By radically changing the way we deliver services to the hardest to reach families in our country, we've tackled worklessness, addiction, truancy and antisocial behaviour. And I can announce today that almost all of the 117,000 families which the programme started working with have now been turned around in terms of either school attendance or getting a job or both. Now this has saved something like £1.2 billion in the process. And the next 5 years we're going to work with 400,000 more families. This is a real government success, and I want to extend this thinking to areas where state institutions have all too often failed. One area is child protection, and this will be a big focus of the next 5 years. Social workers do a very challenging job in fraught situations, and we need to help them. So we'll recruit the best graduate talent through Frontline, the new equivalent to Teach First, from which this school has benefited. We're going to raise the status and standards of the profession. We will train social workers more rigorously, and we'll help good social workers to stay at the front line using their professional judgment, not be promoted away from where they're most needed. We also need more accountability to end the tragedies. Victoria Climbié in 2000, Baby Peter in 2007, Danielle Pelker in 2012. Killed by evil, manipulative adults. These were all children who were known to social services, but for whom no one ultimately took sufficient responsibility in a complex landscape of multiple agencies and protocols and all the rest of it. So we'll bring over the lessons we've learned here in education, where we've intervened quickly and put failing organisations under new leadership. We'll say to any local authority failing its children, transform the way you provide services, or those services will be taken over by non-profit trusts like those in Doncaster and partnerships like those between Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. This is what I mean when I say one nation, extending opportunity to every community in our country. Next, our education system. Now, the whole purpose of our education reforms is to extend educational excellence and opportunity to every school and community, not just a privileged few. Our Academies programme has sent our best heads to some of the most challenging schools. We've opened hundreds of new free schools, many of them in our most deprived neighbourhoods. And we introduced the pupil premium, so more money follows the poorest children into school. Alongside these structural changes, we've set higher standards, a new curriculum that really tests our children, a new emphasis on the subjects of the future, like coding, and the most radical improvement in vocational education, including the opening of new university technical colleges. And as we announced last week, making sure that every pupil studies maths, English, a science, history or geography, and a language at GCSE. Today, because of these changes, the doors of opportunity are opening up around our country. Some schools in our poorest neighbourhoods are now sending more children to our best universities than some of our most renowned private schools. Here at Ormiston Bolingbroke Academy, 53 students went on to university last year, and 52 of them were the first in their families ever to do so. That is what social mobility really looks like. The next 5 years will be about going further, in particular, not accepting any failure in the system, however difficult that may be. One, we need zero tolerance of the failing schools that do still exist in our system. One of the great frustrations of the last 5 years was that because of the bureaucratic rules, we could only intervene in 50% of schools rated inadequate by Ofsted. So as part of our new education bill, we'll sweep away these rules and make sure every inadequate school will be turned into an academy under new leadership. Next, we need to improve what I've called coasting schools. Today, the Education Secretary, Nicky Morgan, will set out to Parliament the principles we'll apply to judge whether schools are coasting. Coasting schools are those where standards have been mediocre for too many years and they're not improving quickly enough. Schools where standards could and should be higher given their intake and their potential. These include some schools rated requires improvement, but who really aren't improving quickly enough. And they could also include schools rated good at their last inspection, but which haven't been maintaining good high standards since. They're giving children just enough to avoid falling beneath our floor standards. But frankly, just enough isn't good enough for my children, and it shouldn't be good enough for anyone else's either. So we're going to say to those schools, if you're not making fast enough progress in raising standards, you have to change. And if you can't do it yourself, you have to become a sponsored academy and welcome in people with a proven track record of running outstanding schools. Now, taken together, these changes will mean we'll turn around 1,000 more failing schools and improve hundreds more coasting schools. Now, this will all be incredibly difficult to push through, but I see it as a fundamental test of this government to see these reforms through. Third, to extend opportunity, we need to give all those who can work the chance to get a decent, well-paid job. And as George Osborne and Ian Duncan Smith said yesterday, reforming the damaging culture of welfare dependency and ensuring that work always pays is central to our mission to make Britain fit for the future. Now, we've already come a long way in the last 5 years. In the last Parliament, we created universal credit so that work should always pay. We capped benefits, so we struck the right balance between incentivising work and supporting the most vulnerable. And we set up the largest ever programme to get people into work since the 1930s, with over 1 million people coming off the main out-of-work benefits and over 2 million people in our country getting into work. But when it comes to reforming, we still have further to go. And I want to be clear about my approach to that reform. It is a one-nation approach. Whatever the pressures, we will stand by my promises to protect the most vulnerable, including the most disabled who cannot work, because that's the sign of the compassionate country I believe in. We'll always protect pensioners because they have earned a secure retirement, and we'll always make sure that work pays so people in work are rewarded. And in particular, that means two things. One, helping those still unemployed back into work. So we'll double down on our reforms to remove perverse incentives in the system, further rolling out universal credit and lowering the benefit cap. And we'll do more to improve employment outcomes for disabled people and for those from ethnic minority backgrounds. This is a fundamental part of what I called in the election campaign my 2020 vision, with 20% more jobs, 20% more university places, and a 20% increase in apprenticeship take-up for black and minority ethnic communities by the end of the decade. It goes right to the heart of the one nation ideal. And it's as vital for our society as it is for our economy. And it's one reason why I want National Citizen Service to become a rite of passage for all 16 and 17-year-olds, changing attitudes by bringing together young people from every community and giving them the skills they need to get on in life and in work. And it's also why I want us to continue pioneering world-leading social interventions like our social impact bonds, so that private and voluntary sector organisations which succeed in helping the hardest to reach get into work can be rewarded with some of the savings that they deliver to the taxpayer. Now, two, it means helping those in work but on low pay. That means dealing with the ridiculous merry-go-round that I spoke about earlier. That's why we're restoring some of the value of the minimum wage. The minimum wage is rising to £6.70 per hour from October 2015, the largest real terms increase since the financial crash, and it's forecast to raise to £8 by 2020 on current projections. It's why we've increased the amount you can earn without paying tax, saving a typical taxpayer £825 a year. And it's why we'll take 1 million people out of tax by increasing that tax-free threshold to £12,500. Now, when you add in the 30 hours of free childcare we'll introduce for working families, and you can see the rewards for work will become stronger and stronger. So by taking on government failure, backing family, education and work, we're not just reframing the debate on extending opportunity, we can actually change the lives of many of the most disadvantaged people in our country. People who for generations were given a few extra pounds and expected to accept their fate. People who've grown up thinking that real success was something for other people, that they could never fulfill their dreams. I believe that within our grasp is the opportunity for every child in Britain to have the chance to go as far as their talents will take them. Building a brighter future is what politics should be about. It's what I'm about, and it's what this government will work tirelessly to deliver over the next 5 years. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got some time for questions from the press and also the organisations represented here, if you have questions. Then I have to go off and do some regional media, and then I'm going to come back and chat to some of you in the audience afterwards. That's why I have to disappear in a minute or two. Let's take the lady at the back on the left.
Hi, Sky News. Won't your policy on foreign nurses result in a shortfall in nurses and result in good nurses not coming to this country?
I don't believe that's the case. We've got a massive training programme for nurses at the moment. There's something like 8,000 more nurses in the NHS today than when I became Prime Minister. The training programme will continue. But crucially, we have an organisation called the Migration Advisory Committee, and they advise us about which occupations to put on the so-called shortage occupation list, the ones where they fear skill shortages will develop. They haven't put nursing on that shortage occupation list, and I think we should listen to their advice above all. But it does lead to a bigger point about migration, which is, as I said in a speech a couple of weeks ago, you shouldn't leave occupations on this list year after year and do nothing about it. What we should be doing as a country is thinking, where are our skill shortages, and then training to meet those shortages so that over time, those things that are listed as shortage occupations can be taken off that list. We are creating jobs. We have a successful economy. I want to make sure that we're training British people to do those jobs so they can have the sort of fulfilling career structure that I've been talking about in my speech. Lady here. There's a microphone coming to you. You may not need it, but just in case.
Thank you. Ed the Speed, founder of Save the Family, a charity that has worked 40 years with the off-the-radar families of homelessness and most broken. My heart sings, Prime Minister, when you talk about the impact, social impact bond, because we have a model, we have a style, and we want really to push this as hard as we can. We can turn around these families. Please, will you look outside the box of the troubled families just in community? We would love you to look at that because we need help. We know how to do it. Give us the tools, please.
Okay. I will certainly have a look at your organisation, but it gives me an opportunity just to... Social impact bonds. People probably hear those words and their eyes glaze over and think, what on earth is that all about? It's a very simple idea, which is saying to poverty-fighting organisations and organisations sometimes dealing with the toughest challenges in our country, that actually if you can, for instance, mend families, keep people out of prison, stop people reoffending, some of these really tough challenges, you should be able to keep some of the benefit that the taxpayer would get from doing that. And so we produce a bond instead of it being a pensioner's income bond or an ISA or something like that. We produce a social impact bond where these organisations can raise money through financial markets to invest in their services, backed by the government, and then they keep the savings that they deliver. It's something Britain is leading the world on. We have issued more social impact bonds in Britain than the rest of the world put together. We have the first ever social investment bank, big society capital, first ever for Britain. And I think at a time when obviously money is short, and will continue to be as we get the deficit down, it's a really good way of financing social change. So yes, we should keep going with it. At the same time, government programmes like the Troubled Families Programme, I think are worthwhile. I think it was a brilliant insight that Louise Casey and others had, which was that some of these families that can be responsible for a huge amount of crime and antisocial behaviour and children not attending school, it's not that they don't get intervention from the state. They get buckets of intervention. The police officers at the door, the social workers at the door, the schools ringing up saying, why aren't the children in school? They get lots of intervention, but what they don't get is someone going into the family to try and work out how to knit back together the bits of the family that aren't working. Lots of people working on the family but not in the family. And that's what the Troubled Families Programme has delivered. And as a result, truancy has come down, crime from these families has come down, employment has gone up. So it's a model, I think, that works. In some ways, it's like old-fashioned social work that's been rediscovered through this programme, and that's no bad thing. A couple more questions. I think I've got, because I've got to make sure, I think we've got ITV. Lewis from ITV.
Thank you very much. Lewis Vaughan-Jones, ITV News. You spoke there about supporting hard-working people, supporting hard-working families. Isn't one way that happens at the moment is through tax credits? So wouldn't reducing or restricting those be wrong? And secondly, do you rule out any changes to disability benefits?
Well, first of all, on disability benefits, we're actually spending more per year on disability benefits than in the past, and I think that is important, helping the most disabled people. In terms of tax credits, what I've said in this speech is right. We have a system at the moment where basically we give people the minimum wage, we have tax taken from people on minimum wage, and then we recycle it back to them. And what I want to see is this move towards an economy with higher pay, lower welfare and lower taxes, rather than low pay, high taxes and high welfare. That's what we should be aiming for. Now, we did well in the last Parliament, more than 2 million more people in work. We lifted many people out of income tax altogether, but we need to continue with that approach, and that's why we're committed to this higher tax threshold, so someone working 30 hours a week on minimum wage isn't paying income tax. That's the right way to achieve this goal of opportunity. I think we've got Jack Doyle from the Mail.
Prime Minister Jack Doyle from the Mail. Can I ask you about the schools you said are coasting? What's your message to parents who've got children at coasting schools who are worried about underachievement? And do you think that head teachers in charge of those schools ultimately should lose their jobs?
I think what I'd say to anyone, whether it's the teachers in a school that's coasting or the parents who send their children there, is that we've all got to lift our aspirations. I mean, this school demonstrates that you can go from 20% of young people getting 5 good GCSEs up to 68% in an area where 65% of the children are on free school meals. And the point is clear. We want to deal with the schools that are obviously failing, the ones that have been branded by Ofsted as failing. But I don't think that alone is enough. There are schools that are doing okay, but could be doing better. There are schools sometimes in quite leafy suburbs who've got a better intake in terms of primary school children who've got good results, but who aren't actually making the most of that opportunity and having really great results. And so going after these coasting schools and saying, come on, let's have a program for improvement, and if you can't do it, we'll help by turning you into a sponsored academy. That will make a real difference. So my message to teachers, to parents, everyone is the same. Let's aspire to have an education system that is amongst the best in the world. Right? We're the 5th biggest economy in the world. We're a successful country in many ways. There's no reason why we shouldn't be higher up those international league tables for education. And if you look at what Nicky Morgan's been doing in the last few weeks, you can see the scale of the ambition. Saying that everyone should study the EBAC subjects at GCSE is absolutely vital, because that's the core of a good education. And that means that all children in our country will have the opportunity, if they want to be able to go on to university if that's their choice. We shouldn't put a cap on aspiration. I remember a few years ago some people saying, well, we've got to 50% of children going to university, isn't that enough? Well, if we'd stopped there, what message would it send to a school like this that is now sending 50, 60, soon to be 70 children to university? It would have been opportunities not for you. So the whole message about intolerance of failure, but also intolerance of coasting schools where we could be doing better, is to raise the life chances of the children at those schools, but also to raise the chances of our country. Because at the end of the day, if we educate the next generation better, that will be the key to success for our country. And there's no reason why countries like Finland or the Republic of Korea, those with really strong educational outcomes, there's no reason why we can't take on and beat them. We've just got to aspire to do that, whether that is teaching standards, whether it's getting the best graduates into teaching, whether it's raising the aspirations of children and parents. We should set the aspiration high. And to be fair to the teachers, asking them on their own is not enough. We've got to ask parents too to aspire to do more for their children and make sure they are being demanding of their schools. And as I know as a parent of myself, occasionally demanding of their children too. Any more? Lady here.
Hi, Josie Souter from Sheffield Alcohol Support Service. I think we'd all absolutely agree that we need to make work pay, but I suppose one of the struggles we have with our service users is around mental health and addiction. So I'd be interested to hear thoughts on going forward around mental health services.
Yeah, I think, look, that's why I put in one of the things that keeps people poor and that has to be addressed if we're going to tackle poverty and disadvantage is addiction. There's no doubt that that is what keeps too many people out of work and out of being able to build a better life for themselves. I think that there's 2 points I'd make. One is, clearly we need better parity of esteem, not just on paper, but in reality, for mental health services. And this was one of the things in the last government in terms of introducing waiting times for mental health conditions and for mental health services, I think will make a difference, as will having the cognitive behavioural therapies and other talking therapies more widely available in the NHS. I think that makes a difference. I also think with addiction, trying to deal with the causes of addiction rather than in the case of, I mean, you were talking about alcohol addiction, but in the case of drug addiction, I think what we inherited was a set of services that were more about maintaining someone's addiction through perhaps a methadone program rather than actually getting behind why they were addicted, dealing with the causes of that addiction, and then trying to get someone to lead a drug-free life. And that is, again, that's what we should aspire to do. It can be done. But I think you're absolutely right to highlight mental health, because just saying in the NHS constitution, as we now do, there's parity of esteem, that doesn't deliver it on the ground. We need that change to take place too. Sir.
Hi, my name's Matt from Street League. We use football to help young people in disadvantaged communities to get jobs. I just wondered if you could talk about the power of sport and whether you see sport playing a bigger role in your ambitions.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I wasn't happy with in the last 5 years was, the situation with school sport and trying to give that a boost, which I think we did do through the school sports premium. I think that is making a difference in primary school. But I think there's still more to be done to tap the extraordinary enthusiasm of sports clubs around the country and the desire of young people in school to play more sport. And I still think there's more to be done to build those partnerships. There's no doubt you represent one social enterprise voluntary body. There are many that use the power of sport to change young people's lives. There's no doubt in my mind that it can be incredibly powerful. Anyone with young children who sees their obsession with sport can see that the role models, the emphasis on teamwork and fitness and all these things is hugely important. But I still think there's more to do, as I say, to harness the enthusiasm of clubs with what we need to do in schools. And I think that's work in progress. One last question, and I think I'll have to leave it there. Lady in the blue jacket.
Hi, Kate Chatwall from the Future Leaders Trust. We're a charity which is seeking to eradicate disadvantage by recruiting and training senior leaders to work in schools like this one. Indeed, the head here has been through our Future Leaders programme. I'd be interested to know, Prime Minister, what role you see leadership having alongside the changes that you've talked about around governance in transforming our school system.
Well, it's absolutely crucial. I mean, when you look at a school's results and you suddenly see a leap and you ask the question, what was it that happened? More often than not, it is a change in leadership that happened. And I think this is an area the government has invested a lot in now in terms of promoting school leadership, believing in the importance of leadership. We were talking about this with the head teacher and those involved in this academy chain before making this speech. I think there's still more to be done. I think Teach First has been a great programme and we've massively extended it. I think the programme you talk about is hugely important. The government's tried to affect this in lots of ways. I mean, obviously people will talk about money, and money to reward great leaders is important, but also we should use everything we've got in our toolkit. So, for instance, I hope you would have noticed in the New Year's honours and Queen's Birthday honours, head teachers are quite rightly now getting knighthoods and damehoods, because as far as I'm concerned, they are heroes and heroines of social change and driving opportunity in our country, and that should be properly rewarded. So we should use all the tools in the toolkit that we can. I think one of the things we were talking about before this speech is that training leaders in the difficult decisions that need to be made, particularly when it comes to making changes in staff, managing out of the profession people who, who shouldn't still be teaching. That is very difficult. I was joking that when I do a reshuffle, the people that I move out, they carry on sitting behind me, and so you don't have that challenge. But I think so. I think rewarding leadership, emphasising leadership, training in leadership, and then celebrating what leadership can achieve in our schools is hugely important. Can I thank you once again for the welcome? This is an inspiring place to come to. And as I said right at the beginning, if in 6 years you can go from a fifth to over 2/3 in getting good results, it can be done everywhere. We can do this. This programme of really changing not just our schools, but also the way that we run social work, making work pay. These changes, these drivers of opportunity, are what the next 5 years should be about. Thank you very much indeed.